My grandmother once told me when she was incarcerated during World War II for being Japanese, her parents had her tear pages from old magazines and stuff them between the gaps in the floorboards of their barracks. Her job was to try to keep the dust from getting inside and all over everything. I doubt she was very successful. We had the intelligence, we had the information, we knew that Japanese Americans were not a threat to national security, but decided to incarcerate them anyways. And because there are parallels between what was happening then and now is pretty scary.
Donald Trump defending himself tonight, even comparing himself to FDR.
Demonstrators around the nation picket President Trump's new order banning travelers from 7 countries designated as having ties to terror.
If you create fear and demonize an entire group, we saw what that led to. And we're starting to head in a very similar direction.
The first time I remember learning about incarceration was during my 11th grade US history course. And I remember my history teacher was trying to weigh both sides, so why it could be justified that it happened and why it was viewed as problematic. And I think I was really frustrated because she didn't say it was wrong.
I think it makes me so sad because none of this was based on facts. It wasn't based on evidence. It wasn't based on logic or reason. It was based on a political agenda, a very harmful and racist political agenda.
Although President Reagan acknowledged that the incarceration of Japanese Americans was a mistake, he stopped short of calling it what it really was, a scandal of epic proportions.
Long ago, this school was once the headquarters of the Western Defense Command. Within these walls, Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt issued military orders that would imprison an entire racial group. But the seeds of the World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans were sown long before 1942.
In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, and it's the first federal law that excludes an entire racial group. And it was passed because white labor, primarily in California, thought that Chinese were presenting competition in the gold mines. Once that Exclusion Act is passed, you see people are looking for another cheap labor source, and they just so happened to turn to the Japanese. When the Japanese came over to the West Coast, they were essentially leasing and purchasing land that was unwanted by the white American population at the time because they believed that it was land that was not good, it was not fertile, and that nothing could be grown there. But then you see the Japanese get there and they start creating really productive farms. It's become Central California, and today we're so used to seeing and thinking of Central California as really fertile farmland, and it's the Japanese who bring life to this land. Then the rest of the white American farming population realize that the Japanese Americans are so productive, and there is a lot of fear that Japanese Americans are going to take over the Central Valley. The Asiatic Exclusion League forms in 1905, And so anti-Japanese and anti-Asian sentiment in general is growing. And as a result, in 1924, the US federal government passes the Immigration Act, which then effectively bans all Asian immigration into the United States.